is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It just was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Okay, I think we're live. Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix. This is your host, Janet Kira Lessin, and my co-host is Dr. Sasha Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker. He's also known as a Mad Painter, and this is Revolution Radio. And we're on Studio B. Our guest is Andrew D. Basiago, and today's show is called "Who is Barack Obama?" U.S. Chrononaut, astronaut, and U.S. presidential candidate Andrew D. Basiago started with Barry Soetero in the Mars jump room program and witnessed his transformation into Barack Obama. At last, the legend of Barack Obama can be told. So before we pull in Andrew D. Basiago, are you there, Dr. Sasha?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, can you hear me? I'm really looking forward to this. Andy's got personal, direct information that it's about time people really just listen to. And if we have time, I'd also like to get your ideas about what happened to Paul McCartney. And I know you also know all about that.
We'll do that on another show. Okay, we're going to focus on this subject and really flesh it out. So welcome to the show, Andrew. Welcome back. Andy's been with us a dozen times.
Be with you and Sasha.
We're delighted to have you. So on the website, I was looking at a bunch of images of Barack Obama through the years, and I put them on our website on aquarianradio.com if you listeners want to go take a look at that, and so you can look at things here. So, Andrew, you served with You want to start from the beginning? How did you meet Barack Obama? And when you're not talking, if you could mute, Sasha, I think you're making some noise with the... okay, somebody make noise. Okay, go ahead.
I first met Barry Soetero, as he was known, in the summer of 1980. There were a group of 10 young people and one Defense Department investigator, Bernard Mendez, who were trained for Mars at College of the Siskiyous in Weed, California. We met in the second half of August and the first half of September of 1980. And Barry, as we knew him, was attending Occidental College in Eagle Rock, California. I had just attended UC San Diego and was transferring to UCLA because my father, who was attached to the program, instructed me to do so because he said, we're going to be doing things up in L.A. What he didn't tell me is that I had to transfer to UCLA because the West Coast jump room that we would be using to get to Mars was in El Segundo, California, at 999 North Sepulveda Boulevard in El Segundo. So that summer, we went up to the Mount Shasta area, and I asked Barry Soetero what his name was. And he said Barry. And I said, Barry what? And he said, Barry. He kind of hesitated as we were coming out of class one day, and he said, Barry Soetero. And I said, oh, Barry, pleased to meet you. My name's Andy Basiago. I said, our names have similar cadences. You know, Barry Soetero, Andy Basiago, similar. And I befriended him. And there were only 10 teenagers in the program to begin with, so we all got to know each other. And I roomed with Barry Soetero when, about a week later, when we got dorm rooms at College of the Siskiyous. Before that, we were all staying, some of us had parents there, we were staying in local hotels. But about a week into the program, we were given, or even just days into the program, we were given dorm rooms at College of the Siskiyous. I was assigned one with Barry, presumably because he was born just 45 days before me. We were same-aged peers. He was born on August 4th of 1961, and I was born on September 18th of 1961. And a number of things happened in that setting. One of them that I think is significant is I came back to our dorm room one day at 4 o'clock, and Barry was dressed in a red shirt with white mufti. There's some pictures that show him around age 20 in this Muslim clothing. And he was praying to Mecca. And I came into the dorm room we were sharing, and I said, "Oh, Barry, I didn't know you worshipped Islam, that you were Muslim." And he said, "Yes, I'm part of a Muslim splinter group from Indonesia called Subud." And I said, "What's that? I've never heard of it." And he said, "It's a sect of about 20,000 Muslims founded by my birth dad." And I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "Muhammad Subud Sumawati Hajojo." Now, my investigation of that individual now, almost 40 years later, was the founder of the Indonesian Muslim splinter group known as Subud with an H. But the Subud, his middle name, it did not use an H. So what I'm saying here is that in summer of 1980, the individual, pardon me, who would ultimately call himself Barack Obama, introduced himself to me not only as Barry Soetero, not only as an Indonesian, but as the son of the founder of Subud, Muhammad Subud Sumawati Hajojo. Okay, now let's go forward 3 or 4 years. In the summer of 1983, I was planning for my 5th year at UCLA. Being born in the largest cohort in American history, we had to be 5th-year seniors because we simply could not get classes to graduate in 4 years. So I took summer school in summer of 1983 at UCLA, so I would have enough credits to graduate as a fifth-year senior the next year, my fifth year in college. No fault of my own. It was just the largest, birth year 1961 was the largest in U.S. history, the second being birth year 1960. So the colleges were just crammed with students, and you couldn't get all your classes. So you had to be a fifth year, many of us had to be fifth-year seniors. So I was on Bruin Walk in summer of 1983, having a discussion about what the corporations would mean in the future. I had interviewed Buckminster Fuller in October of 1981. Bucky was then writing a book called Grunch of Giants about how if we didn't find a way to make corporations more democratic, they would become the tyrants of the 21st century. And I had studied, as a history major, I had studied the thinking of Scott Nearing. And I was having this very involved discussion about the corporations with a white South African activist, an anti-apartheid activist named John. He was blonde and he had curly hair. I don't know his last name, but he was from South Africa. And he was on Bruin Walk there on the UCLA campus, lobbying for divestment by the University of California from South African corporations on the grounds that they were pro-apartheid and hence racist. And I was sharing with him just my studies of what the corporations would become if we didn't find a way to make them more democratic and humanitarian in their structure and function and activities. So he said during the conversation, I've got a housemate over at my rental house. He'd be fascinated about what Fuller had to say about corporations and your studies of what Scott Nearing had to say about what we should do with corporations. Why don't you come over and meet him? So we took his Volkswagen Bug from Lot 6 at UCLA, and we went over to this house he was renting as a South African guest and activist in the United States. And the rental house was at the corner of San Vicente Boulevard and Bundy Avenue. And he introduced me to his house guest, saying, Andy, this is Barack Obama. And I was so blocked from my Mars jump room experiences. They were using the American version of the Soviet Leda machine on us whenever we would return from Mars. So it's taken me 40 years to go back and remember what happened in that program. Even my schooling at College of the Siskiyous, I've done a number of site visits there just to recall what we did there. But I've spoken now to numerous people who were in the program, and 4 of them, in addition to myself, remember Barack Obama, who was then known as Barry Soetero, being in the program. But at this point, now 3 or 4 years into my Mars experiences, I was essentially, and I write about it in my upcoming book, I was basically of two minds. There was Andy, who was studying history during the day division, and then there was Michael, my alternative identity, who was studying mathematics in the night division and going to Mars down in El Segundo. So in other words, when this white South African introduced me to Barack Obama, who I had previously been introduced to as Barry Soetero, I was in my persona as Andy and not realizing that this was Barry from the program. And there was good reason why, also beyond just the suppression of memory that I was under at that time, for that to have occurred. For example, he was older, taller, using a different name, going to a different school. I had known Barry Soetero of Occidental College, and this was a taller, more mature, thinner Barry Soetero introducing himself to me as Barack Obama going to Columbia. Okay, and I was very talkative as an undergraduate, and I said to him really something I shouldn't have said. I said, African Americans are really the quintessential Americans. Your people have been here for 400 years, 200 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, and 100 years of invidious discrimination. And I really, as a result of all the real true greatness, and I wasn't just shining as apple. I really do believe that African-American population is a great community. It's the most successful minority population of any country in the history of the world. And I've often said if I ever become president of this country, I will have the privilege of being president not only of the country, but of the African-American community of this country. And I said that to Barry. I said, with such accomplishment against such odds in the black community, this is really a remarkable community. So why identify yourself as an African, as Barack Obama? I said to him, that would be me, like me as a Polish American calling myself Lech Warszawski, which was kind of a joke. It was based on, Lech Walesa of the Solidarity movement, which was then very hot, and Warszawski for, Warsaw, Poland. So I really shouldn't have said it, but I was really trying to say to him, I don't really think African Americans need to take on Pan-African names because they are really the quintessential Americans. Many of them have their ancestors have been here longer than most Caucasians' ancestors have been. And he said, no, man, my dad was from Africa. He was Barack Obama Sr., and I'm Barack Obama Jr. So this was the same person who 3 years earlier had said to me that his name was Barry Soetero and that his father was Muhammad Subud Sumawati Hadjojo of Indonesia, was now telling me that he was Barack Obama and that his father was from Kenya. Now here's what I found in my investigation of who Barack Obama actually is. First of all, the Barack Obama that Malcolm X talked about in his speeches as a Pan-African hero was the father of the Barack Obama that Stanley Ann Dunham went to Hawaii with. In other words, when the person calling himself Barack Obama, when Barry Soetero said, no, man, my dad was Barack Obama Sr. and I'm Barack Obama Jr., that was not true. If he was Barack Obama, he was Barack Obama the third, because the man who attended Hawaii with his putative mother, Stanley Ann Dunham, was the son of the Barack Obama that Malcolm X lauded in his speeches. Okay? That's number one. Number two, he was the same person, and he was now alleging that his father was from Kenya. He didn't say, I'm from Kenya. But then, later in the 80s, when I entered law school at Northwestern School of Law and Barry entered law school at Harvard, he then began alleging that he was born in Kenya. Well, which was it? Was he born in Indonesia? Was he the son of a Kenyan? Or was he born in Kenya? Okay. So I did some more research when he was president. I tried to bring this up. I mean, there was much discussion of who Barack Obama was. There was Sergeant Joe, or Sheriff Joe Arpaio's research in Arizona. There was the work of Dr. Jerome Corsi of New Jersey, who went to Kenya to explore who Barack Obama was. And I did my own research, and I found out the following. First of all, the person calling himself Barack Obama, the person who served as the 44th President of the United States, who we allege, and we were telling the truth, he was in the Mars Jump Room program with us, and he lied about that fact. Okay, he changed his name not from Barry Soetero, but from another name, Barak Munir Ubaid, in Skookumchuck, British Columbia, on October 14th of 1982. So the significance of my interaction with Barry is that he introduced himself to me as his true identity, and then within less than a year after he co-opted the identity of his mother's former classmate, Barack Obama, he introduced himself to me as the son of that man. So I believe that my information is important. It occurred right on the moment in time where this Indonesian, Barry Soetero, created his false persona as Barack Obama. So he changed it in Canada, alleging that he was the son of this former classmate of his mother. But he wasn't. Not if we're to believe what he told me back in 1980. Now, why would he have done that? Well, Stanley and Dunham, during, for example, our going-away party in the program in September of 1980, they knew he was going to be the first black president of the United States. What do I think the truth about Barack Obama is? I believe that he's a dark-skinned Indonesian and that his Kenyan ancestry, and hence his ancestry and status as an African-American, was faked to make him a hero in black America, to make him seem like an African American to get elected president. And I believe that may be a very, very cynical ploy that was implemented by the Central Intelligence Agency. We can go into a discussion of why I think that's so. But I believe that the individual who served as the 44th President of the United States is an Indonesian. I think he couldn't reveal that fact also because of legal reasons. The Fulbright program provides free scholarships to American-born graduate students, but to foreign-born undergraduates. If, as Barry Soetero, he accepted Fulbright scholarship money to go to Occidental College in California and then to Columbia University in New York City, if he did so as Barry Soetero, he was caught between a rock and a hard place. If he acknowledged that he received a Fulbright, he would have had to admit that he was not a natural-born American. But if he asserted that he was a natural-born American and hence qualified to be president under that clause of the Constitution, he then would have had to acknowledge that he received money as a foreign national. So in other words, he was caught between the impeachment clause for federal loan fraud and the disqualification of not being a native-born American, being an Indonesian. So there were a couple of things going on here. He was...
Well, Andy, this is, if I could just might interject here, his Muslim background would explain his antipathy toward Israel.
Well, he's lied about everything. In fact, from the level of psychohistory, I mean, I remember interviewing Robert Dallek, the distinguished historian, when I was an undergraduate. He had just written a psychohistory of Ronald Reagan. I think what's fascinating about the psychohistory of this individual who's used the name Barack Obama, but whose real name is Barry Soetero. And by the way, that means when he was sworn in twice as president, as Barack Obama, he was committing fraud. He was swearing a federal oath under an assumed name, and that's a felony. And it would have been grounds for his impeachment. But I think the psychohistory of Barry Soetero will be that he is a pathological liar. I mean, I was accused of being such by Matt Markovich of the ABC affiliate in Seattle simply for describing the first of two defense projects that I worked on as a child, DARPA's Project Pegasus. And I've been telling the truth about everything in my life since I was 6 years old, you know? But here we had a president. This is why I feel so obligated to talk at this point about Obama, even though he's left the presidency. Here we had an individual who was president of the United States for 8 years, and we never adequately explored the fact that everything in his life was a lie. He was his nationality, his ethnicity, his religion, his sexual orientation. I mean, I didn't go into the fact when he was president, but he made a homosexual advance on me when we were in seclusion in the jump room program. I declined it because I'm straight. I don't have any, I'm a very liberal individual who accepts people for their own orientation, and I said that to him. I said, I don't think anything less of you, Barry, that you have a same-sex attraction, but I'm not into that, man. I'm into girls. So that's, that's how I responded. But I didn't want to discuss that when he was president because I didn't want to get into that Larry Sinclair, escapade and all that stuff. But Obama is gay. And at least he was when he was Barry Soetero. He was making passes at the guys in our program. I mean, and he made a pass at me. And who am I? I'm a member of the Washington State Bar who's admitted to the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington. I have 6 degrees, including degrees from UCLA and Cambridge. And I'm not going to make this up. I happen to be very straight and very much in love with my girlfriend. And it's not something that I have any interest in publicizing. But this individual, Barry Soetero, made a homosexual advance on me when we went into seclusion that summer to work on the CIA's threat assessment of the Martian humanoid civilization. He and I and Regina Dugan were asked to read about 4 inches of French intelligence documents about the Martian humanoids, collected by the French External Intelligence Organization. I forget exactly what the French name of it is. But in any case, what I find fascinating about Barry Soetero is he has lied about everything. Claimed that he was a Christian. He was not. He told me he was Muslim. He claimed that he was from Kenya or from America. He was not. He told me he was from Indonesia. He claimed that his name was Barack Obama. It was not. It was Barry Soetero. He claimed to be married and have...
if I may, there's equal evidence, not that he's a pathological liar, although that may be part of it, but that he's part of a organized effort on the part of his handlers in certain directions. That he would, he's a CIA operative, and he's doing their agenda. It certainly had to contribute some to his the stuff he was putting out. They were grooming him to do their bidding from the presidency. Or would you entertain that as a hypothesis?
So, Sasha, this is what amazes me about this country and where we're at. This is an individual who was president for 8 years. 7 individuals came forward during his presidency and described how they were in the Mars Jump Room program. 5 of them, Basiago, Stillings, Mendez, White Crow, and Johnston, confirmed that Obama was in the program. And yet he made some snarky comment, made some joke out of it, and no one in the mainstream media ever explored the fact that Barack Obama, whose real name is Barry Soetero, was the first American astronaut to become president. Now, I think that that's historically significant. Now, we also have to ask, why would this individual lie about being an American astronaut? Isn't there pride in that? I mean, look at that for those of our generation. Look at how the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts were celebrated as heroes. Why would any of us, first of all, be asked to lie about the fact that we went to Mars? Why would those of us who claim we went there associate the sitting American president and engender disbelief? Or was it because perhaps it was true? And why would he lie about being an American president? This goes to who Barry Soetero is. I believe he had to lie and make a joke of our claim that he was in the Mars Jump Room program because he didn't want to establish his connection to the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yes.
I can't think of any other reason. I mean, when we had that going away party in the program in September of 80, Stanley Ann Dunham, his putative mother, and I'm using that phrase because there's evidence coming out of England that she was not his birth mother because when they tested his genes from a drinking vessel, he didn't have any Anglo-Saxon genes. So I believe she was his handler, his CIA adoptive mom, as it were. But she was talking about the fact that he was going to be president. We're talking 1980. When was Obama elected? 2008? 28 years later. 28 years before the fact, Stanley Ann Dunham and she was saying to the kids in the program, no, you don't understand what I'm saying. I'm not just saying he's going to be the first African-American president, the first black president, because I believe in him. I'm telling you, we know he's going to be the first black president. That was 28 years before he was elected. That's the story of Barry Soetero.
Don't they know this, Andy, though? Andy,
it's time travel.
Some meetings. You were at some meetings where, well, I think it's more than time travel. It's just they know who they want to have, so they start grooming them and making it happen.
In fact, during that summer,
years before it does.
When Thomas Stillings, the father of Brett Stillings, who was one of my co-trainees and fellow jumpers ultimately, and the youngest, in fact, one of the heroes of the story, because if Brett hadn't come forward, I probably never would have broken through my memory blocks and remembered the Mars Jump Room program. But Thomas J. Stillings, his father, who was an operations analyst for Lockheed Skunk Works, said to Brett one day in class when Barry went up to talk to the instructor, Major Ed Dames, said, "Brett, how do you feel being in a Mars training program like this with a future president?" and nodded towards Barry. And my father then stuck two fingers in the aisle between our respective desks and looking at me said, "Two future presidents." And then later that summer, when my father and I drove Barry, as we knew him, Barack, if you will, up to the airport at the Hoopa Indian Reservation so he could take a connector, that being Portland International Airport, to visit his grandparents or putative grandparents in Hawaii, I said, "Dad, is it true? Do I really become president?" And he said, "Yeah, Barry becomes president in his late 40s, and you become president in your 60s. So there was a discussion of both the Obama and the Basiago presidencies that summer. Now, I don't know whether that's going to come true, and I'm not asserting it has to come true because it was predicted, but his presidency was being openly discussed in the program by my father, Thomas Stillings, Stanley Ann Dunham, and other people with CIA ties who were attending. They were auditing the class. So, but we have to ask ourselves, why did this individual not with pride reveal to the American people that he was an American astronaut? I mean, think of that. Think of the implications of that. You know, here we are, we're living in this situation now where the truth movement has been derogated by people making up stories of what they did in space. And here we had a president who went into space and he lied in the most cynical way to deny being an American president. That doesn't make a darn bit of sense unless we factor in his ties to the CIA. That's the only reason I can think of
Andy,
why.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Andy, can you hear me? I'd like to interject. There's a new show on Netflix called The Family. And basically, if you don't play ball, then you are out of any kind of power position or the ability to make any money. If you don't play ball, you know, you can end up dead. So once you're in there and you're one of the chosen ones, you were selected and so was he. You were chosen. But I'm sure somewhere down the line, someone's going to approach you and say, these are the rules of the game. And either you play by them or you're dead, basically. But I
never have. I mean, when the CIA asked me to transfer to Columbia like Barry did, I told them I didn't want to. I think, and also, by the way, I think that the CIA had a jaundiced view of my mentor at UCLA, Norman Cousins. I think they thought that I became devoted to Norman's ideas about world federalism. And in fact, I had many discussions with Norman in which I told him I don't think it's such a great idea. I don't think in a world where the United States is disdained so much that world federalism could even be managed properly in the interest of the whole, plus this country. So
Andy, Jim Mars told me that that the regular and also Richard, other people have said the same thing, that basically they'll get somebody like you to tell the truth that's so buried in all the other stuff that there's the truth, it's out there. Here's the guy that's telling you what's really happening. He's got witnesses and everything, but it's so it seems like it's just swept over by the sweep of other stuff that they do, and you're swamped. Your information is swamped. It's a strategy that Dolan has even talked about.
I believe this is the America we're living in. Think of the implications of this. We had an individual who was an Indonesian claiming to be a Kenyan and sometimes claiming to be an American, who promoted himself as a Kenyan when he was at Harvard Law School, saying he was born there. Okay, and his fellow astronauts came forward. Imagine that. Imagine if 40 years after Armstrong and Aldrin landed on the moon, they were still lying whether they had landed on the moon or not. I mean, think of the implications of this. We were going at half the age of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts, millions of miles further, with much more advanced technology than rocketry, And one of us became president, and another one of us was told he was later going to become president, namely myself. And for 8 years, that individual served as president of the United States, and nobody, not a single person in the mainstream media, ever explored the multiple informants, the multiple individuals claiming their involvement, which was true, in the Mars jump room program, and the fact that Barry Soetero, later calling himself Barack Obama, was one of our fellow jumpers. I mean, think of the implication of that. I mean, it's almost as if the fictive personality disorders that some individuals have has spread to the entire country. We are not a country that is achieving the truth. Look at how the truth movement has deteriorated with individuals making up their accounts of having gone into space. Once the Mars jumpers came forward, and we had Ralph, Neumann, Basiago, Stillings, Mendez, Whitecrow, Johnston, people started making up stories. I've talked to their spouses. I've talked to people who have studied their claims. All of those claiming, for example, that they were super soldiers end up making ridiculous claims that can't be true, whether it's Aaron McCollum claiming that he's part dolphin, or Corey Good claiming that he was briefed by his intelligence handler in the Kuiper Belt, or Randy Kramer saying that, the general who's been briefing him briefs him in his own mind. Oh, he doesn't call you on the phone, Randy? Geez, the military guys I've spoken to since I was a kid are usually on the phone, if not in a restaurant with me. You know, in other words, the whole truth movement has been undermined by what I think is the commonplace nature of a kind of a fictive personality disorder. I think you called it pathological confluence, Sasha.
Yeah, yes, that's right. It's more than it's really more than that. It's look at what's happening underneath. When you start telling the truth, you see that the government has been complicit in murder, theft, and horrid drug smuggling, just absolutely horrible things. That means that people have committed mass murders, and they would have to either have a truth and reconciliation or put these people in jail. And that's what's underneath it, and why these people are hanging on to their positions, in my opinion.
One question I have is why this many years? How many? What is it? It's 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Why is the government still clinging to official state secrecy in the way that it is? For example, a remarkable individual that was in the jump room program with me was Regina Dugan. She had just entered Caltech at age 16. I think she would go on and start working for DARPA in 1996 when she was 33, having been born in March of 63, I believe, about a year and a half after me. And, you know, by any standard, Regina Dugan is a remarkable woman of my generation. She's an inventor, a scientist. She was the first female to direct DARPA. She could very well be president someday. I could very well select her as my vice president, in fact, if I run again. But, you know, I entered her name on Alexa today, the information service from Amazon, and it makes no mention of the fact that she's an American astronaut who went to Mars multiple times. In fact, in my book, I describe how I did the night run with Bernard Mendez, Regina Dugan, Mary Jean Eisenhower, the aunt of our friend Laura Eisenhower, and another woman named Linda something. I don't know her last name. I don't remember it. But we did a night run to Mars. We went up there at night, and we had some really weird experiences. So think of that. Think of the fact that several generations now of American women have heard the story about how Sally Ride was the first American woman on the space shuttle in 1981, but they weren't told that literally that same year, various American women were going to the Red Planet. Regina Dugan was going. Mary Jean Eisenhower was going. And American women whose names I don't even know were going. Okay, because I met them there on the surface, as well as men. Ross Perot was going. Admiral Stansfield Turner, who had just served as Jimmy Carter's, just served previously as Jimmy Carter's director of the Central Intelligence Agency, was going. We're living in a fictive country that's still exploiting and abusing official state secrecy, so that even those whose careers are being promoted by the government, like Barry Soetero, like Regina Dugan, the truth about their activities is not being shared with the American people. And the question I'm posing is, look, I don't like being a tattletale. I just want to know why. Why is there this institutionalized lying? That's what our country has become. And
what do you think? What's your hypothesis why they're keeping this secret? You must know on some level.
I think that the intelligence community is running the show, and that people who are drawn to the intelligence community, it's kind of what happened when I was doing interviews of people regarding the nuclear weapons situation, when we found that a lot of the Manhattan Project physicists had this sense of being in a club. I think that the cult of intelligence has distorted our national character. I think people who are drawn to the cult of intelligence, who are drawn into careers with CIA and other alphabet soup agencies, get a kind of a thrill of knowing the secrets and not sharing them with others. I mean, I saw this going on even at the college level, at UCLA, for example. There was a whole realm of information that was never being shared by professors, but it was being shared with each other. So I think that that's what's happened, is the cult of intelligence is directing the country, including the mainstream media, I might add, especially television. My treatment on television has been abysmal. It's been a complete distortion of everything I've done for this great country at the risk of my own life. It's been miserable. It's been dishonorable. If I had been Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin, they would have lied about me walking on the moon. It was that bad, the way I've been treated by television. I've been getting treated very fairly on radio, though. Radio's been a saving grace. But I think the problem is the cult of intelligence, and we really have to start asking, who is drawn to these careers? Is there a kind of a thrill they get knowing the secrets? And is that the problem? Why don't young American women know that Regina Dugan is an American astronaut? Why do young black kids not know that Barack Obama was not only the first president, he was the first American astronaut to reach the White House? Why wasn't that celebrated? We've had other black Americans like Mae Jemison who have served as astronauts. Why wasn't the country told the truth about Barry Soetero? In other words, we're stunting the growth of our country, the realization that there is only one race, the human race, and that we're all capable of incredible things, especially when we start recognizing that and working together. And I just feel that this cult of secrecy has gotten totally out of hand to the point where...
Yeah, I think that part of the cult of secrecy is what's the big secret is that the function of government is theft, which means taking more from the proletariat, the regular people, and having more for the inherited wealth and the people that have wealth. And that's been the trend. And your analysis when you ran for president last just really identified these corporations, which are free of regulation, artificial people that are allowed to give unlimited money, and this gives coverage. It's capitalism, and it's a system. And the thing is, we never really had the democracy. But I tell you, audience, if Andy was president, we'd really have a chance of having a democracy.
Are you there, Andy? Uh-oh.
Mute, Sasha.
Mute,
what happened?
Mute, Sasha, mute. We're getting feedback. You have the sound up too high.
Apropos of your comment, Sasha, in both DARPA's Project Pegasus and the Mars Jumper program, I was cheated of everything I was promised. I was supposed to have $30,000 put in trust in 1972, payable on my 25th birthday, which would have been 9/18/86. That was denied. And then in the Mars Jumper program, we were promised zero-interest loans to buy homes in the Redding, California area, the Mount Shasta area, on the grounds that that was going to be the new home base for the Mars astronauts, like Houston, particularly Galveston Bay, is for the NASA astronauts. And we were promised that we would get the revolving door of government service for the rest of our careers. None of those promises were kept to me by my government. So yes, the government is operating like a criminal organization. And if I ever become president of this country, I'm going to clean it up, because I was personally damaged by it financially. I mean, I had to create a fundraiser to pay for the restoration of my vision simply because I wasn't paid for what I did for our government, for our country. And I'm sure if it's gone on twice in my life, it has as well in the lives of others. It's operating like a criminal conspiracy. And I think that it is working with those who play the game. The problem is there is no respect for the truth. I mean, it was Benjamin Franklin who said honesty is the best policy. And at this point, those who literally are pathological liars are those who are dovetailing best with government service. That's why I feel obligated to talk about Barry Soetero, this individual using the alias Barack Obama, even now that he's left the White House. This is significant. Imagine if we had found that Ronald Reagan or John F. Kennedy were pseudonyms. Think, regardless of what our party affiliation or our politics is, think of the country we were. Imagine, again, if Armstrong and Aldrin hadn't told the truth about landing on the moon. That's what they asked those of us who went to Mars to do, and that's what they've done. When we came forward in 2011, William Stillings and I, who were literally trained with Barry Soetero, then using the name Barack Obama, 44th President of the United States, made a joke about the fact that we had identified him as one of our fellow jumpers. He made a joke out of it. Could you see them making a joke out of Armstrong and Aldrin landing on the moon? How would we have felt about our country if that had happened? I'm just trying to contextualize what has actually happened in my life.
Let me just add that the registrar of births that had viewed the actual birth certificate somehow mysteriously died in a plane crash, so that she could never be interviewed.
Right, Loretta Fuddy. Now, who was Loretta Fuddy? Loretta Fuddy had been the social manager for Subud, this Muslim splinter group that Barry Soetero's birth father, Muhammad Subud Sumawati Hajojo, founded in Indonesia. She had been their social manager from 2006 to 2008. She then became a Hawaiian state official. She was the one who assisted Obama in attempting to establish that he was born in Hawaii when she knew he wasn't. She was in a plane crash with about 7 people in the ocean and died of a heart attack, supposedly, during the plane crash. That was Loretta Fuddy. Now, I don't necessarily give any credence to the notion that Obama, as president, killed his grandmother and these kinds of stories. I think the whole thing got way out of the whole discussion got distorted when they started to investigate whether he was from Kenya, because they never explored the ready information we already had that he was Indonesian, and they focused on, is this individual from Kenya? And there were many stories told about whether he killed his grandmother to hide her work for the CIA or whatever. And some of it I just think got totally out of hand. But what disturbs me is even now that he has left the presidency, there is still not a generalized understanding by the American people of who this person was. And for those people who laughed when he made a joke out of the Mars Jump Room program, I just want them to know we were telling the truth, and it was not a joke. I watched 2 of my comrades get ripped apart by reptoid predators on the Martian surface. And I carried Bernard Mendez a mile to safety after he collapsed. And William Whitecrow and I saved our lives and that of Brett Stillings firing upward for about a half hour with automatic weapons on pterodactyl-like predators. And then the only treatment we saw of that in the mainstream media was when Chris Hardwick made a big joke out of it on Comedy Central. Believe me, fighting pterodactyls, fighting for your life against creatures that haven't existed on Earth since before the KT extinction is not exactly grounds for humor in my book. That's a measure of how distorted our natural culture has become. Chris Hardwick is married to a Hearst. He's married to Phoebe Hearst, the great-granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst. And yet he had a comedy that made fun of American astronauts fighting for our lives on another planet with valor and with desperation. I'm sorry, but that's sick. I have to call a spade, as they say in poker, and say that's sick. Our country is sick. And that's why I ran for president, to try to make it healthy again. And I will again when I'm healthy. But, and my eyes are repaired. But I really have to speak out and say the concern I have is that our country is sick. I mean, to make fun of astronauts who fought for their life on another planet, to make a joke out of that, to lie about that when you were the sitting president, I'm sorry, but I think that Obama's denial of his participation in the Mars jump room program was the lowest that any American president has ever sunk to. Because it's one thing for a leader to disparage somebody who's bravely served the country. I think, for example, of the time that George S. Patton chewed out that soldier during World War II who had shell shock, and they depicted that in the great movie about Patton's life starring George C. Scott. But this is even worse, because Obama was president, or Soetoro, as it were, was president when he lied about us, and he was a comrade of ours. He literally sacrificed the valor of his comrades, telling the truth about what we did on the Martian surface to promote his career. I'm sorry, but that was the lowest that any American president has ever fallen to. And that's why I feel compelled to speak out about Soetoro, even though he's left the White House.
So how would you have him do it now? What would you, if you were him, how would you do this?
I would have him keep his
program.
He made a promise to our group of those who were coming forward through Bernard Mendez. Bernard Mendez spoke to an intermediary to President Obama, as he was known. And he agreed. He said he remembered being in the program. He remembered me vividly. And, of course, we had a lot of contact. I mean, we roomed together. We were trained together. We were sometimes on the Martian surface together. And I was very flattered that the president remembered me after so many years, almost 30 years. But his memories seemed vague and dreamlike. And that was truthful. They did for all of us, because the American version of the Soviet LIDA machine, which is a memory suppression device, was being used on us every time we would come back from Mars to El Segundo or to New York City, which is where the East Coast jump room was. Okay, he then made a promise that he hasn't kept. He told Bernard Mendez to tell the rest of us that after he left the White House, he would come forward and discuss and do an interview about his experiences in the Mars jump room program. He has not done that. He left the White House 3 years ago. Where is it? It's almost the end of the term after his, the Trump years. Where is the interview by Barry Soetero about the fact that he was in the Mars jump room program? What does he have to lose? Everybody's asking the question of whether his wife was born male or not. And, I like to say, as a public official, as somebody who sought the presidency, I like to say, if people can change gender between lives, why should any of us care whether they change gender during their life, right? It's not a concern of mine. And I have not promoted any of that scuttlebutt of whether or not Michelle was Michael. That's not what this is about. This is about an individual named Barry Soetero who served in the Mars jump room program with those of us who went there when we were still practically kids. I mean, I first went to Mars when I was 19 years old. Brett Stillings went to Mars when he was 14 years old. And when this colleague of ours reached the presidency, he lied about us. So what I would have him do is tell the truth. I thought he had everything to gain by discussing the fact that he had served the American nation as one of its astronauts, and to this day, I'm just amazed that he hasn't discussed it. I mean, it's almost like an addiction to lying that these people influenced by the cult of intelligence are beholden to. They cannot tell the truth. Why wouldn't...
I think he's under threat, that he's done a service to the people of African heritage that are here, that they're proud of this beautiful, well-spoken dude with his beautiful wife, and whatever he is or isn't, what he stands for is for black pride, which we're all we're all for. But there's also a little technical thing that, from what you said, is that you should have better memories when you came out in Albuquerque, when that was your jump room, than when you came out in New York or in New York or in California.
Oh, hold on. We're at the top of the hour. That was fast. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Narco-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a civil majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! Just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us. Here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another? Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
Come
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents, and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at revolution.radio. And I'm your host, Janet Care Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, our producer, Thomas Becker, also known as a Mad Painter. And our guest today is Andrew D. Basiago, and we are talking about who is Barack Obama, a very interesting show. Before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the button on revolution.radio and make your donation, because we really, really need these donations to continue to bring you all these good works. And I don't think we know what the fundraising level is at this point, because Hawk is still not out of the hospital and he's got control of all the dials. So we just need your donation. Please make a donation. Okay, Sasha, are you back?
Yes. So we, Andy, you brought up something that really is, I think, a core, not just the criminality of the intelligence agencies, but the media that has become shows what's endemically wrong with the entire social matrix in which we live, which is that the media is run to make money. It's a corporation whose purpose is to make money for the stockholders. And so that when, say, Bernie Sanders says something about policy and stuff, he might get a few seconds here and there. But when all these other candidates that are doing sensational things and they're more entertaining and people are going to look at them and so forth, they are driven by money. The head of ABC, when the Twin Towers came down, he said, it's going to be a big year. Yeah, we're going to make a lot of money this year because, Twin Towers. So got it. These people, it's a capitalist system which is concerned with making profit for businesses and people rather than a government of the people, by the people, and for the people that Lincoln and Andy want us to have again. Or if we ever had it, to have it to begin with.
Right. And I've been telling the truth to fellow Americans and to the American people since I was a child. And when my time travel experiences were reported by Matt Markovich on the ABC affiliate in Seattle, Washington, our 12th largest city, a city that I practiced law in for 25 years, much of it, or a lot of it, pro bono work on behalf of fellow Washingtonians. He ended his reporting of my claims by saying that I was either a pathological liar, a sociopath, or the fastest talking science fiction writer on the planet. And at that very time, the individual trusted with being our president was an Indonesian named Barry Soetero, who was lying about his parentage, his nationality, his race, his religion, his sexual orientation, his name, everything about him. So I think that we have to make it clear that, the McCarthyism of the 50s isn't here in the sense that nobody's being accused of being a communist. But our country is sick in terms of calling honest people pathological liars and entertaining pathological liars as harbingers of truth. It's a serious problem. I mean, here we had Obama lying his head off at virtually everything, every characteristic of his background, and yet I was telling the truth about a classified defense project that I had served on 40 years earlier at that point. I served in Project Pegasus from 1969 to 72. 68 to 72. And I was interviewed by Matt Markovich in 2011. So it was virtually 40 years later. And he had to make the false allegation that I was a pathological liar. But did he ever do a story about the fact that the President of the United States has developed a clear profile of being a pathological liar? No. So we're really in a very negative situation, I think, as a country. We're calling honest, good people pathological liars, but we're allowing pathological liars to run our government and our corporations. And I mean,
you can tell that a person has no argument when they start using ad hominem, attacking the person instead of the content of what they're saying. And the media ignored your content. They're selling entertainment and being snarky at the expense of the public's knowledge of the truth.
Pretty much, and kind of focusing a little bit more closely on the subject of space, when Congress, as the embodiment of the will of the American people, passed the NARA Act of 1958, that's what founded what ultimately came to NASA. The number one mission that the space agency was given was the expansion of human knowledge of space and the near-Earth environment. And yet, when American astronauts first went to Mars in 1964, over 50 years have passed, and the American people still haven't been told the truth of that. 50 years, 2.5 generations. So despite the passage of the Space Act, of the NARA Act of 1958, only 6 years later, when American astronauts first landed on Mars, the American people were never told. Now, those two astronauts lost their lives, and that's part of the story. Maybe that's one of the reasons they weren't told about them. But over 50 years have passed. I mean, I was only 3 years old when that happened. I'm now 57. So 54 years have passed, and the American people haven't been told that the first American astronauts landed on the red planet, Mars, in 1964. So, I mean, that's just intolerable as far as I'm concerned. The will of the American people, as expressed through the Congress, has been subverted. The military agencies and the intelligence agencies, and that's in fact what NASA is. It's a military agency. All of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts were military officers, and it was a publicity program to conceal the real space program, which we're now calling the secret space program. But, for example, when he was still alive, William Whitecrow told me that at any time he and I were on Mars, there were 1,500 other Americans there. So this was a big deal. This wasn't just a few people. A small number of people have come forward and told the truth to the American people. But there were thousands of Americans involved in the secret space program. And so I just feel obligated to continue to speak out, because why is this secrecy being adhered to in this way? What interest is it serving? To have government based on secrecy, ruled by secrecy, as Jim Marrs said? I'm sorry, but I don't think it's the highest expression
It's keeping the criminals out of jail.
Well, that's part of it, is the criminalization of the government function. But I think that it's clear that those who play the game and don't reveal the truth, that they're being promoted in their careers. And that means that they've institutionalized.
There you go.
That means they've
You
institutionalized.
hit the nail on the head. That's what's happening. Those who play the game get promoted.
Those who lie and those who tell the truth are being attacked.
You have to have something incriminating against you to be in the game, or else you're not in the game. It's a huge criminal conspiracy.
And secrecy itself has a corrosive effect on people's willingness to come forward and on the truth itself, because I've had many discussions recently with Bernard Mendez, and now, after coming forward for years, he doesn't feel comfortable coming forward now because we can't prove our claims through official government documents. Well, we've got 7 people who've come forward. They didn't know each other when they came forward. They had different backgrounds. They lived in different parts of the country, and they had corroborating information. So there's even a kind of a negative impact on former truth tellers because of the deafening silence from the media and government regarding the claims of those of us who did serve, who have spoken out. Some of us who have served are losing our will to continue to come forward. And I've done my best to try to promote esprit de corps among the Mars jumpers to continue to come forward. But quite frankly, it's kind of scary at this point. It's down to just myself and Ken Johnston Sr.
Right.
The other 5, one is deceased, that's William Whitecrow, and the 4 others, Ralph, Neumann, Stillings, and Mendez, aren't talking anymore because they just got tired.
Listen, we know that there were thousands of people, and some of you are listening to our radio show right now. You know you're there. Now is the time to open up while Andy's still alive and full of vigor. Come forth now. Let us talk to Andy, please.
So there's even, a negative impact on truth tellers. I've become aware of the fact that some of those who were coming forward have just given up because they got tired of being called liars constantly. They got tired of the fact that our experiences hinged on our narration of what happened rather than the media confirming what we did and so forth. It's a mess at this point, and I have to share that with my fellow Americans. We should not accept this. We should have a higher standard.
What can we do?
I think we have to have a wholesale election of people outside of government.
Right.
And I think we have to challenge.
Get rid of the rich people and the government people. So why, right now, people don't respect people who aren't in government. So you have to be a congressperson or a, senator or something or governor. But why?
Right, that was not part of the constitutional model, and yet look at how in 2016. I mean, my platform was lauded by political pundits as awesome, brilliant, unrivaled, mind-blowing, genius in print, and a life experience to read. And I got interviewed by the BBC, which as a Cambridge grad I was proud of and thankful for, our friends across the pond. And yet I was never interviewed by American television. Why not? I was a member not only of the Washington Bar, but the U.S. District.
You were ahead of your time. Andrew Yang is not a politician, and he's now getting some recognition. But he's still down at the 1 to 3% ratings, because if people are looking for someone who will beat Trump, for one thing. Nobody will run against Trump. Why not? You know, do we always have to have the incumbent president? Why not mix it up every time? So there's other people who are now starting to come forth, but it might be too late. But I think that we should limit it to 4 years and just do it again. Something new. They get too full of themselves, and the government just tends to get corrupted.
I think I think that we have to examine, in fact, whether the presidential election process and the way that specific individuals are favored in the debates and so forth, whether, in fact, the CIA is running the whole show. I think that's the case.
Or somebody's running the whole show.
One of the ways that
you can watch that show, The Family, it's very corrupt. It's far more corrupt than we ever imagined. It's very perverse.
We're very close to having the right amount of states ratify the demand for a constitutional convention. And in a constitutional convention, the first thing that the constitutional convention could do is they could change the number of people in the convention. They could change any aspect of the Constitution, including getting rid of the Electoral College. That is a critical thing. The Electoral College was made to keep people like Andy or Marianne Williamson or people or Dennis Kucinich who from becoming the president. Dennis, for example, lost out as a credible witness because he said, I had a UFO experience. I saw one, and then they laughed him off the stage. Well, it's time to.
Look what Obama or Soetoro, I should say, said in that 2008 discussion when Dennis Kucinich admitted that he had seen a UFO. He made a joke out of it, saying the real question is whether those coming here from outer space are Republicans or Democrats. And that was from an American astronaut who had been to Mars. I cannot think of a better example of the degree to which politics has become the art of deception than the fact that Barry Soetero, using the alias Barack Obama, would run for president of the United States after spending, 147 days in the Senate, hardly even voting, and would lie about his nationality, his parentage, his ethnicity, everything, his name, and would deny and lie and make a joke out of the question of extraterrestrialism, which is fundamental to our self-interest as a country and as a planet. And instead of saying something intelligent about the fact that we should have a nuanced UFO and ET policy, recognizing that those coming here may be good, indifferent, and evil. But instead he made a joke out of it because it was the acceptable thing to do, to make a joke out of extraterrestrialism just like they do on the evening news all over the country on television. And yet he himself was an American astronaut. I cannot think of a better example of the situation we're in, where those being elected simply by doing the cavalier comedic thing are even denying about their own identity to suppress intelligent discussion of policy. In that case, extraterrestrialism. Obama could have said, well, as an American astronaut, I have a special interest in this area. But instead, he made a joke about what the real question to ask was whether the ETs coming here are Republicans or Democrats.
And these are all secret programs, the secret space program, everything you're in. So we're missing something here. He's not going to be the only one, especially somebody running for a presidential office to say it, because he'll get laughed off the stage like Kucinich. So we need to figure out something else, some other way that this is going to come forward.
Well,
they're
if
not
we've got
going to
everybody
blow
to start,
their chance of becoming president. Yeah.
If we've got everybody to start honoring the truth principle, there wouldn't be any inherent disadvantage in telling the truth. I'm just pointing out the nature of the problem. As an intelligent individual, Barry Soetero figured out that he had to pretend to be an African American, even though he wasn't. Had to pretend to be cavalier about the critical question of what policies we develop regarding the extraterrestrials who are coming here and have been coming here for thousands of years. I think that we're a better country than that, and we're a bigger country than that. We just have to get back to our roots as a country where honesty is the best policy, and we have to tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may. So that if everybody started doing that, then there wouldn't be an inherent disadvantage to telling the truth.
So how are you going to do that as a candidate for president in 20? You're not running this year.
I'm probably not running this year because of my eye problems, but perhaps in 2024, I'm going to continue to abide by the truth principle and hope that the country catches up with me. But I mean, I hope in this show I've given a clear picture of the nature of the problem. The fact that Barack Obama, as he was pseudonymously called, was president for 8 years, and the American people never found out who he really was and what he had done. And it wasn't just me coming forward saying he'd been in the Mars jump room program. 7 people came forward, and 5 of us identified him as being in the program. I mean,
that's the whole thing about what constitutes proof. In a court of law, testimonials are proof. But in, this UFO field, it doesn't matter if 100 people have contact with extraterrestrials. It doesn't matter if 1,000 people. They just label the person that's having the experience cuckoo, So how can we change that?
To emphasize the fact that under American law, when somebody testifies about what they've done or what they've seen, they're as long as they're telling the truth, and they've been duly sworn, and they meet other threshold tests of reliability, they're not suffering under infancy, insanity, or intoxication. They are free to testify about what they know or what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's clear. When
another form of evidence is that machine. There's patents on that Soviet machine that scrambles your brain. You know exactly what it is. There's a whole bunch of things that you allude to that are, I think, corroborative evidence.
Yeah, it wasn't I who came up with that. It was Ed Dames who told me they were using the American version of the Soviet LIDA machine. I mean, I'm not an expert on mind control. That was information from the program. So, yes, I think your point is a strong one, Sash. That is that in the testimony of individuals like myself, a lot of government information has actually come forward that we couldn't have made up. And yet the journalists and the public officials refuse to look at this stuff. It's really amazing. I had no idea what they were doing. I asked him.
Yeah, perhaps in your book, as you lay this out logically, and you're very adept at that, you might gain some credibility, and people might start discussing it.
Well, I finished my time book. It's 300 chapters, and I'm finishing my Mars memoir. It's 150 chapters, and I finished 110 of them. So that's what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just laying out the truth of what happened, and people can take it or leave it. I mean, there's nothing, with the whole government dedicated to lying to the American people, I'm not going to apologize for telling the truth. And I did it.
Well, lying is being normalized under the current administration. I think they reached over 10,000 lies. And then if you watch the news, they do fact-checking. They go, now we're going to fact-check to see what's
what we have
truth on that one. But people don't care anymore. It's really weird to see how the society is being transformed. They don't care about honesty. They just, I don't know, they just care about who's going to put food on my table and money in my pocket.
No, it's what the purpose of the truth is. Andy's purpose is to help people, to make a more humane, civilized civilization. That's the purpose he uses truth for. It's different than this other stuff. Telling truth so that you can be punitive is stupid. What we want to do is go past it and incorporate everybody in a society that works. That's what I think.
Yeah, I focused on the true natural history of our solar system and the true history of the state of the art in our technology. Those are two areas that I think people have a right to know as part of the common heritage of humankind, about our solar system and our place in the cosmos on the one hand, and our particular place in history based on the advancement of science and technology. That seems to be the major thrust. In fact, I think that really start asking whether those who have been pushing for ET transparency are being attacked. I mean, I'm developing a list of individuals who have pressed for ET transparency who have been the victim of false claims of different atrocities, one atrocity or the other. So I think we have to look for that and really start being less willing to believe gossip and rumors about people. When I ran for president calling for ET transparency in my 100 proposals, somebody made the ridiculous, completely unsupported claim that has nothing to do with anything I've ever done or ever been about, claiming that I had raped and killed 111 children. And I've learned since then that I've even lost bookings at conferences because people believe that nonsense. That's how McCarthyite the country we're living in actually is, where good, honest people like myself have been accused of atrocities falsely, but people who have been practicing at the highest levels of government have been concealing even what the space program has been doing for 60 years. We're in a mess. I will just continue to speak out. I don't know if it costs me the election, so be it. I would rather lose telling the truth than win by lying. I think this whole idea that you have to lie and calculate to be elected to office has to go. That's a major point, by the way. I have very intelligent friends who I went to UCLA with as an undergrad who say, Andy, we love you like a brother. You're a great guy. We're proud of you. We're proud of what you've done publicly with your revelation of these 2 classified defense projects that you served in. You've really raised the bar in terms of the quality of your presentation. You present yourself very well, but give up any, they tell me, give up any idea of ever being elected president or elected anything, because you can't tell the truth like this and be elected. And I've come back and said, why? Why should what you're saying is tantamount to saying, in order to be elected to office in America, you have to be a liar. That's a very low standard that we've sunk to. But that's the position of many of my friends from UCLA. They've literally said to me, give it up. You can't get elected to anything now that you've talked about being in a federal time travel program, being in a federal Mars visitation program. And I said, but I've proven it. I brought forward hundreds and hundreds of facts. And people with PhDs in political science and history have been investigating my claims and proving them. Most recently, Dr. Michael Salla. And I said, don't you realize we're on the threshold of this information becoming part of our understanding of what reality has included? How is that not in the interest of the American people? But that is the position of many of my friends from college. They've literally said to me, give it up, Andy, because you can't talk about these subjects and be elected. And then I think, well, wait a minute. You've heard about subjects like time travel and extraterrestrialism since you were babes, in your cribs, and your parents had the various TV shows on that were, Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and so forth on. I mean, in other words, we've had 3 generations who have benefited from the media programming about the so-called paranormal, or the unsolved, and yet we're acting like it's the third rail of American politics. You can't talk about these subjects without invalidating your candidacy, and that's just ridiculous. Many of my college friends who said that were born after the Twilight Zone and Outer Limits came on American television. So where is the learning over the last 60 years? Where is the learning about the fact that we're visited by extraterrestrials, that there's a secret space program, that the federal government has been experimenting with things like time travel? Why the breakdown in reasoning with all that 3 generations, 3 20-year cycles of fiction on television, getting people accustomed to the ideas? Why the resistance to internalize the information and understand that it's based on reality? I mean, I've had numerous ghost
Follow
sightings.
the money. They're making money off of keeping us the way we are. Follow the money. Where's the how much black budget money is going, and where is it going? And, and follow the crimes. You've witnessed child abuse in government facilities, all kinds of things. When you tell the truth and people really listen to you, there are people that are going to be disgraced by the terrible things they did, and they'll need to make amends.
And, when I start to study things that, in terms of my own experiences, then I look back in history. For example, when I was age 4, almost age 5, I interacted and met an elderly Sasquatch and his son, who was my age. And then a couple of days later, I played with his son a game of keep away at the Great Lakes Sagandaga in the Adirondacks of New York State. And so I've always been interested in the Bigfoot controversy. But do you notice how Bigfoot is always described as the legend of Bigfoot? Even one of the best documentaries is the one that Stacy Keach narrates, called Bigfoot, Legend Meets Science. Well, wait a minute. To our great-grandparents, Bigfoot was not a legend. They made Bigfoot a legend because being concerned about Bigfoot's critical habitat cut into the profits from the lumber industry. That's my position. In other words, I'm saying that my investigation of the Sasquatch is that they are a tribe of humans that are hairy and that have lived out in the woods for centuries, and they were known by our ancestors.
Absolutely. Some of my Indian friends talked about regularly meeting with the Sasquatch in Central California and sharing food. They're quite comfortable with interacting with Sasquatch.
So we have to be very sensitive and aware of how the truth has been spun. Have they ever said on any of these Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science type shows to your great-grandparents, Sasquatch was a reality? He was known as the boogeyman or the bogeyman or the wild man of the woods in many of the Native American languages. So we really have to look at how reality is being spun in the modern instance, and that's an example, I think, of it.
Great. Well, we've got about 22 minutes. What else do you want to cover on this show? Or is there more you want to say about this subject?
I just wanted to emphasize that those who served in the Mars Jump Room program did so at a young age. We were half the age of Gemini and Apollo astronauts. We went millions of miles further. It was a horrendous experience. I myself watched one comrade being ripped apart and another being bit to death in the stomach by these dinosaur-like predators on the Martian surface. The whole area of history that has to be rewritten surrounding Howard Robart Hughes, the legendary aviator. He did not die in 1976. He died in 2001. That has been proven by Major General Mark Music and his colleague Douglas Wellman in their book Boxes, The Secret Life of Howard Hughes. I met Howard Hughes in the 1980s a number of times when I was serving in the Mars Jump Room program. So he wasn't kept alive just to work on the Glomar Explorer, which was a submersible to pick a Soviet submarine off the floor of the Pacific Ocean. He was also working on the Mars Jump Room program. He was the director of the program. We know from Bernard Mendez that the intelligence director examining the files of everybody admitted to the program was none other than Richard Milhouse Nixon, living in seclusion after resigning the presidency in disgrace and living in San Clemente, California. Nixon was still working for the CIA after leaving the White House. And he was, according to Bernard Mendez, he was the principal intelligence analyst examining, for example, who should be admitted to the program. And there were a number of traits they were looking for. They were looking for high intelligence, cooperation, grandiosity, and an environmental orientation, experience camping and traveling. There were specific things they were looking for in the Mars jumpers, but Nixon played a role in selecting them. We've had the revelations that Laura Eisenhower has brought forward regarding her being invited to go to Mars in 2006 and 2007 with her then 2-year-old twin sons, Gavin and Garrick Eisenhower. But Laura has not emphasized with as much clarity the fact that her mother's sister, Mary Jean Eisenhower, was one of the Mars jumpers. I would appreciate if she would come forward and reveal that, because I've revealed it, and it would be helpful if somebody from the Eisenhower supported that truth by bringing it forward. We just lost Ross Perot. Ross, of course, was one of the jumpers. And not so long ago, we also lost Admiral Stansfield Turner. So there were some pretty distinguished Americans who were going. And I think the story should be told, and that's what I do in my book. But I want everybody to know it's a true story. I had already arrived at the time I shared my time travel and Mars experiences in the alternative media. I had already worked with Norman Cousins. He had nominated me to be the editor of the Bulletin, The Atomic Scientist, and the dean of journalism in Oklahoma when I was 26 years old. I decided instead to go to law school. I reached not just the Washington State Bar, but the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington. And I had nothing to gain and everything to lose by coming forward with this information. I have not made it up. I've actually gone through an extensive process of memory work that's pretty much taken my whole adult life. I mean, I started investigating my time travel experiences in 1999, 20 years ago, and my Mars jump room experiences 10 years ago. In 2010, through 2009, 2010, around the time I came forward, and then Brett Stillings contacted me about our experiences in the program. So I've spent a good part of my adult life dedicated to bringing the truth forward about these two programs. And I just want everybody to know I had no motive in making anything up. This has been the truth from the beginning. At the same time, as I said, the truth movement has been weakened by a pattern of those who have not had real experience making up their experiences. So we've really been hurt both sort of coming and going. The truth was denied, but then the truth was, then falsehood was promoted. So we have to clean this up so that we and our children and our grandchildren develop a proper understanding of what our great country has accomplished and why and where we are. But right now it's been completely besmirched. It's been completely confused by suppressing the truth of truth tellers, but by suppressing the truth in general, attacking truth tellers with false allegations of committing atrocities and so forth, and then those who have not had real experience forward and promoting fictions. So at this point, it's a mess. It's going to take years to clean up. And we will.
Andy, if I may, Andy, it's like from my perspective, there's not a glorious past that we're responding to. There was only one time when black people really had a decent chance in the South, and that was when Grant had U.S. troops there. And since the troops have been withdrawn, it's been hard on black people. And I don't think that the idea of some kind of reparations is a bad idea at all. Let's really look at it. It is not that glorious. Grant himself allowed all kinds of incredible theft from people. He didn't have the ability to judge people. And so I don't think our past is so pure. Let's just do better for everybody that's here now, and heck with the past.
Well, that's one of the reasons. Let me discuss that aspect of the Obama cover-up. I want to make it clear that I am a supporter of the black people of this country. I said when I ran for president in 2016 that it would be my honor to be president for not just the people of America, but the black community, because this is the most remarkable minority community in the history of civilization. The accomplishment in the black community, despite slavery, Jim Crow, and invidious racism in our culture, has been phenomenal. To me, especially as a UCLA Bruin, where Kenny Burrell and other black professors were some of my favorite professors, and I learned the most from them. Rayford Johnson, I was so proud when Rayford Johnson invited me to the release of his autobiography in 1998. You know, I recognize the incredible success of black America despite 400 years of slavery, Jim Crow, and invidious discrimination. But I want to make it clear that I'm speaking out on behalf of the people of this country.
Go ahead, finish your.
Something very cynical invented by the Nixon administration was passed rather than real progress. So, for example, during the Nixon years, when the idea of community development block grants was being advanced, the Nixon Republicans advanced the idea of affirmative action. And I even had an argument about affirmative action with Barry Soetero. And I said, you're missing my point. I'm not speaking against helping black Americans. I'm speaking for them. I'm speaking for community development block grants for predominantly black inner city neighborhoods before we start the racial palliative of affirmative action. Now, I believe that the decision that was made by the Nixon administration to prevent a race-based insurrection in our country between black and white Americans actually led to the creation of Barack Obama as the myth that was promoted. In other words, I believe that he was handled from the time he was about 10 years old to be the first black American president, and that a myth, an intelligence operation, was launched to put a dark-skinned Indonesian in there because the apparatus, the oligarchy, did not want a black American descended from the slave class of our country to hold the White House for fear of maybe retaliation. So in other words, I'm trying to rectify something that I think was extremely cynical that Obama embodied. I know that many black Americans might look to him and say, well, and he's just criticizing the first black president. No. I'm identifying the fact that an intelligence operation was passed against the interests of African Americans, somebody who is not an African-descended individual and has no genetic connection to the black Americans who helped build this country and who were harmed by 400 years of slavery, Jim Crow, and invidious discrimination, was put in power precisely because he was not from that population. So I'm trying to set the record straight to make it clear that one of the most cynical scams was put over the black population of our country in promoting this dark-skinned Indonesian, Barack Obama. So there is a significant issue here in the area of racial equality. Why, for example, could Andrew Young not have been the first black president, or Jesse Jackson, or Shirley Chisholm, or Edward Brooke, or any of the other African Americans to previously hold office or to run for president? The reason is they were literally blocking equity and participation by African Americans, and they were creating somebody who would play the role of seeming like an African American, and that's why they fabricated Obama. That's why they fabricated this Indonesian's Kenyan ancestry. That goes to the very cover-up I'm describing. And I believe it denied racial equality in the sense that it advanced a dark-skinned Indonesian, the son of Muhammad Subud, rather than a son of America. And I find that very, very cynical. And on behalf of the black people of this country, the people that I would be so proud to be president of, as the greatest minority group in the history of any country, I'm speaking out for black America by saying, wait a minute, let's go back and look here. Is it not the case that this was an intelligence community operation to put a dark-skinned Indonesian in office rather than somebody connected to the actual history of the country as a black man? And I think that was done precisely because they wanted a black president, but they did not want an African-American black man or woman to serve in that.
There was such a demand for Colin Powell among ordinary people, and he didn't run.
He didn't run, and I remember many Republicans secretly criticizing him as not being intelligent or whatever, and Colin Powell's a very intelligent man. And that really goes to what I'm talking about, that the most talented black men and women were denied the equity and participation represented in serving as our president. And instead, a counterfeit was advanced. A racial myth was created around this dark-skinned Indonesian gentleman, Barry Soetero. And that's why there is so much discrepant information of him first telling me he was Indonesian, then telling me he was the son of an African, then years later when he got to Harvard Law School claiming he was born in Kenya. I mean, it was always a different story. Why? Because it was made up. He wasn't getting his facts straight. And I believe that in that sense, what ultimately became the Barack Obama cover-up, as I think we can call it, this intelligence operation to put a dark-skinned Indonesian in the White House rather than somebody truly of African-American ancestry, it was done, I think that began back during the Nixon years, the very years when affirmative action was passed rather than broadly based solutions like reparations, like community development block grants, to heal the damage that was done to black America. So I'm speaking out on behalf of African Americans. I'm saying, look, this was an intelligence operation. They were even lying about this guy's sexual orientation. This guy came on to me when we were 19 years old and serving in the Mars Jump Room program. He might be a married guy now, but he was certainly a gay guy back then. And in fact, many African Americans were approaching me after I came forward in the Mars Jump Room program at conferences to ask me that very question. But the bottom line is that I believe back during the Nixon years, to head off an insurrection by African Americans, they wanted to create a great black hope, if you will, and Barack Obama was that intelligence operation. The problem is he is not African American. And for that matter, he's not even the son of Stanley Ann Dunham, because the British found that he had no genetic markers for Anglo-Saxon blood. She was his adoptive mother. And by the way, I didn't mention that when we would have breaks during our training program in summer of 80, Barry Soetero and Stanley Ann Dunham would go outside and smoke and not even talk to each other. So I saw them as co-professionals, but not as a mother and son, ever. And when she gave her lecture on cross-cultural communication, he didn't attend that class for some reason. And after I had the discussion with him about his Muslim faith and his ancestry as the son of Muhammad Subud, Sumawati Hajojo, in our dorm room, he pretty much avoided me for the rest of the training program. I think he realized he had said too much. So he was really on the threshold at that point of concealing his Indonesian ancestry and his identity as Barry Soetero, and he was just starting to get involved in his false identity as Barack Obama.
So you mentioned that when you were at some meeting, you were at some kind of meeting where they announced all the presidents, a variety of presidents, like a dinner function, and then they announced Barack. So they groom these people, or they select these people years in advance. What is their criteria? Why do you think they selected Barack? Why do you think they selected you?
I described how in the early 70s they weren't selecting people; they were identifying them based on quantum access. So I described how I was in a luncheon of about 30 or 40 people connected to Project Pegasus in the early 70s in Albuquerque, where both of the Bushes were identified as future presidents, and then I was at a much smaller lunch with a young Bill Clinton. He was, I think, still at Georgetown. He was quite young and skinny. And at that lunch were Harold Agnew and my father and Ray Conniff. Not Ray Conniff. Well, I'd have to go into my book and recover who I've been able to do memory work and remember was at that. What was his name? Well, there were several people who are identified in my book who were at that luncheon with Clinton. They weren't selecting presidents, Janet. They were identifying them, and they were apprising them of their destiny. So, for example, when Obama and I were in the Mars Jump Room program, it was clear to both of us that we were future presidents. Now, maybe I have selected another timeline by speaking out and being a servant of truth. Maybe I've destroyed my chances of becoming president. And if that's the case, then we're all in trouble. But no, they weren't selecting the president playing kingmaker. They were identifying who the American people would be selecting far in the future, coaching them.
But do you think that the mentioning of that to this powerful audience may have affected the timeline in some way?
I think I may have altered the timeline because maybe they have decided that I should not be president because I came forward. It's possible. They seem, like I said.
What I'm saying is when you state that you're going to be president, and we've identified, doesn't that in some way affect the timeline and make it come true?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think we don't have really a baseline of data to establish whether that's true or not. I think it's possible that revealing the fact that I was pre-identified as a president, I might become president. People might say, okay, it's Andy's turn. Or they might say, no, it can't be Andy because he believes he's supposed to be president. I think it could fall both ways, and I really don't know.
There's another possibility that spirit of your 100 principles, just like the things that AOC has been saying, that Andy, whether he's physically here or not, the spirit of Andy, which is a beautiful spirit for this country, will be with us for a long time.
Well, thank you, Sash. That's very kind. If I can see, I will.
Go ahead.
I will
We're running out of time.
I don't know, and I mean, I tried to have the best possible impact I could with my 100 proposals. So we'll see. But I just really had to speak out about this because, during the whole 8 years of the Obama presidency, the truth about who he was never told, and the truth about the Mars Jump Room program was completely distorted and suppressed by the mainstream media in a way that should give us all concern about whether or not we're living in a fascist country. Things that we accused the former Soviet Union of doing are now being done regularly in our society.
Right.
And I don't want to live in such a country where people bravely go into space and when they come forward and tell what they've done, they're lied about or made fun of. I find that rather sick, quite frankly.
Right.
I asked to talk about this issue because it's occurred to me that 3 years have passed and Barry has not come forward and done what he promised to do. He said he was going to come forward after he left the White House, and he hasn't done so. Why not?
He said that to who did he say that to?
He spoke to an intermediary whose name I do not have, but it was directly communicated to me by Bernard Mendez when he spoke with the White House in around 2011, 2012 timeframe, right around the time that President Obama gave that joke in what was it? It was Wired.com magazine. He said that he didn't serve on Mars, and his first disinformation campaign regarding Mars was he made a joke saying the only contact he had with Mars was watching Marvin of the Martians on Saturday morning cartoons with his daughters. The second disinformation ploy was when Mars exploration rover Curiosity was launched. He said, "You're probably not going to find anything up there, maybe microbes at most, and I'm pretty busy, but why don't you contact me if you do?" And then right before leaving the White House, Barack Obama, as he was known, wrote an editorial for CNN Online saying that we might get to Mars within 30 years. All three of those were disinformation ploys concealing the fact that he himself had been to Mars numerous times as an American astronaut. And because he lied about me, there's really no great loss.
We're out of time. Thank you, Andy. That was a great show. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Thomas Becker, Mad Painter. Much love and blessing, and aloha.
Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons? Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, your carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From E.T. contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter